Did you know that one haunting melody could sway the fate of an entire war? This is the story of the piano piece that turned a war. It may sound unbelievable, but history offers plenty of moments where art becomes more than human expression. It transforms into a force of influence, diplomacy, and even resistance. Let's take a journey back to the early years of World War II. The stage is Prague in 1941, under Nazi occupation. In the midst of extreme repression and censorship, a young Czech pianist named Rudolf Verkusny discovered a forgotten manuscript penned by one of his nation's greatest composers, Bedřich Smetana. The manuscript contained an exquisite piano piece, Bohemian Polka. Smetana, hailed as the father of Czech music, had written this piece decades earlier as a gesture of cultural pride. Verkusny, though a relatively unknown pianist outside his homeland, saw Smetana's music as a powerful symbol of defiance. But here's where it gets astonishing. This wasn't merely a melody for the enjoyment of a conquered people. It was about to become a message that echoed far beyond the borders of a small, subjugated nation. How, you ask? For the answer, we must delve into the extraordinary relationship between music and politics. During times of oppression, art often becomes a secret language, a code of resistance. Verkusny, with mounting courage, began to play Bohemian Polka at clandestine concerts across Prague. The audience at these secret gatherings risked imprisonment, even death, for attending. For them, the melody's recurring motifs resonated with an unmistakable call for freedom, a tribute to Czech identity in a time when their national spirit was being crushed under the Nazi regime. Imagine, shadowy rooms filled with anxious faces, faint candlelight flickering against cold walls. The room would grow silent as Verkusny's fingers coaxed the first mournful notes from the piano. Each note pierced the stifling air with unspoken words. "We are still here." By the time the final chord echoed across the dim hall, whispers of defiance were already stirring. But let's step out of Prague for a moment and fly across Europe. Unbeknownst to Verkusny, his clandestine performances were being discussed in exile by prominent Czech diplomats and intellectuals in London. Key among them was Jan Masaryk, the son of the first president of Czechoslovakia, who became the voice of his occupied homeland. When he learned of the secret musical movement taking root in Prague, he seized upon its story as an element to rally international support. At this point, let's add another layer to this story. Churchill once said, "In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies." Yet in this case, truth itself became the weapon. Masaryk began sharing accounts of the clandestine concerts with Allied leaders. He famously quoted lines from the Bohemian Polka to stress the importance of cultural solidarity while urging nations like France and the UK to not forget the victims behind enemy lines. The story, touching and inspiring as it was, turned the piece into an emblem of resistance, ensuring continued Allied attention to the plight of Czechoslovakia. Now comes a gripping twist. In 1943, Franklin D. Roosevelt heard about Verkusny and the resilience of Czechoslovak culture while meeting with Masaryk. Little did FDR know, this moment would set in motion an incredible chain of events. Word traveled quickly, and soon Verkusny found himself invited to the United States to perform. His debut was at Carnegie Hall, where he played Bohemian Polka to a rapturous audience, including influential American journalists and politicians. All eyes and ears were on Verkusny that evening, yet the ultimate revelation wasn't mere entertainment. For those in the room, particularly Czech refugees and diplomats, it was an affirmation. Their nation lived on through music. Let's pause here and appreciate not just the audacity, but the precision of this artistic diplomacy. Against all odds, a Czech pianist armed with nothing more than his instrument had turned a cultural artifact into a rallying cry heard around the world. The impact? Massive. As news of the music, the concerts, and the bravery of Firkusny spread, Allied leaders were reminded that the fight against Nazism wasn't solely on the battlefield. It was also a moral and cultural endeavor. Reports from resistance groups bolstered public sentiment back home. These acts of cultural defiance fueled Allied efforts to restore sovereignty to subjugated nations. But there's one final twist before we close. In 1945, as the Nazis were retreating, Firkusny returned to Prague, a hero. He walked through the city streets and found himself greeted by those who had whispered the melody of Bohemian polka during darker times. At a public concert commemorating Czechoslovakia's liberation, the audience insisted he perform it once more. The sight of hundreds, if not thousands, singing or humming along proved what some already knew. The melody had become their unofficial anthem, one that spoke of freedom in the midst of captivity. To this day, Firkusny's name is etched into the annals of Czech history, not just for his musical genius, but for wielding art as an instrument of courage. Our takeaway couldn't be clearer. Even when words are censored and voices are oppressed, music speaks. And sometimes, if it speaks loud enough, it can turn the tide of history. So the next time you hear a piece of music that sends chills down your spine or brings tears to your eyes, remember this remarkable story of Bohemian polka. It's a living testament to art's power to transcend barriers, ignite sparks of hope, and, even in the darkest times, remind us of the indomitable human spirit.